I'm usually not that procrastinating, but usually I have an idea at some point what I'm going to say. Today's a little bit different. I decided to wing it. I'm generally going to talk about the education curriculum a little bit. I'm going to tie it into something else. But this is my third public event weekend in a row. Candy mentioned we were at the Society for California Archaeology conference last weekend, and it's always challenging to walk into that venue because, as she said, that the people there, archaeologists, they have a 3-day conference. The program is about this thick. They have a couple hundred papers, and at least 80% of what they talk about, as Candy mentioned, is about Native people. And there's rarely Native people in the room. I've been involved with them for almost 25 years, and there have been times where I was the only Native, not only in the room, but in the entire conference. Fortunately, that has started to shift. But why has that happened? It's not just that we're shy. We're sort of shy. I used to be shy, and I had to get over it. But it is a cultural education that we got within our families and within our communities because of the recent history that we experienced here in our homelands here on the West Coast. My dad was born in 1924, and he was raised by grandparents who were born and raised in a time where it was literally dangerous to be Native. So by the time my dad was born in 1924, he wouldn't necessarily have to worry about somebody coming and taking his scalp. But that feeling, that understanding, that protective cover that you apply to yourself and to your family, of being careful who you talk to, careful with redeeming yourself, that just doesn't go away on its own. As a matter of fact, for many of our people in communities, it still hasn't gone away. Because the danger is not past. And we'll come back to that later. So that idea of being careful, being shy, not talking openly. My dad grew up at a time where he was told, be proud of who you are, know where you came from, and don't tell anybody. He grew up in the very early years of his life out on the coast, south of Big Sur, where there was no running water, no electricity, no lights, but big, big homeland. From the cabin that he was living in when he was young, you could see the Pacific Ocean and what now is Highway 1 down below. And it was a time when he learned who he was and where he came from, but they didn't have those labels slapped on him. As I jokingly say to people, my dad's grandmother who raised him didn't say, okay, it's 12 noon, for the next 2 hours we're going to do only Indian stuff. Just Indian. We're going to forget all that American, Hispanic, Spanish, all that. No, we're just doing Indian stuff. Oh wait, it's 2 o'clock, we're done. We're going to go back to the other stuff and we're going to not talk about Indian stuff. It didn't work that way. It was part of the fabric of everyday life. They were Native all the time, even when they were asleep. They breathed. They breathed Totron. When later I started doing, with our community members, doing research on our history, to put it down on paper because that's how others wanted. They wanted on paper. Now it's electronic paper. But if it's not on paper, it doesn't count the same way. And when we go to our elders and ask questions, they go, well, tell me about that Indian stuff. And almost without fail, they say, oh, I don't know any Indian stuff. What? Well, you're out there in the country and you're doing all that. I don't know any Indian stuff. So from our modern perspective, we had to learn to ask the right questions in the right way. And we learned from allies, like Emmy, who came and showed us how they had learned and experienced Native culture in documentation. And we learned to ask different questions. For instance, we would start asking the elders, so when you woke up in the morning, what would you do? Oh, well, my grandmother would get me up, and then I'd go over here to the meadow, and I'd pick some plants, and I'd take it over here, and I'd gather water, and maybe some fish in this particular place, because we weren't allowed to go fish in other places. And we pieced together the puzzle. And we would artificially, after the fact, slap those labels on them, saying, this is culture. You don't see this in other places. You don't see it in the cities. You don't see it in the Hispanic communities. You don't see it in the Filipino communities. You see it in indigenous communities. My mother was also native. She was Rumsien. And she grew up in Salinan, the edge of our territory. And she, unlike many of our people now, grew up knowing who she was and where she came from. But again, there wasn't a lot of knowledge. But even with her, growing up in a more urban area, she knew a lot more than she did. I lost my dad in 1990, and that's when I kind of woke up. Not to be native, but to realize I can't wait anymore. I've already waited too long. I have to do my part in perpetuating our culture that has been here for thousands of years. And so I began that journey. And one of the things that's important to learn is that, and I'll share it with you now, I'm going to need some props here, real quick. We're just going to improvise, just grabbing stuff. So keep this in mind. That's long ago. Now my ancestors, my elder mentors would tell me, that's the dawn of time. So remember that, the dawn of time. This little thing right here is now. Today. Now, the elders that taught me, one of the things they made clear to me is that that's contemporary science. They say that. Well, say maybe 13,000 years, 15,000 years. When I started working with archaeologists in the early 90s, they would concede maybe 7,000 to 8,000 years. And if you ever went with 5 digits, right, 10,000, oh my God, you're radical, aren't you? And of course now we're in the 15,000 years, and the radicals are now talking 1820 and recently in Article 35. My elder mentors told me this is way over there. Out the window, across the hill, across the mountains, across the shore, past Hawaii, past China, just keeps on going. We were here at the beginning. So, for the moment, we'll concede to the scientist. Yeah, or as one of my elders said, well, they're pretty smart, they'll catch up eventually. So, that's the dawn of time. And this is now, rough guess, don't laser it in, but approximately Chris Columbus got lost and bumped into the Caribbeans right around there. But everything about our modern day newcomer culture, I use the word newcomer in mixed company. Everything about our modern day culture tells us this doesn't count for much. Even if you take the short portion, it gets dismissed. It's almost eradicated for a while. We like to say it was asleep. So here's Chris. And of course, everybody knows, right, that he didn't really discover America. Just wanted anybody that wanted to date that right? Oh, thank you. And of course, he never made it to the mainland, by the way. He didn't discover America, he discovered the Caribbeans, except there was thousands of people there already. So if we want to talk about California, though, a little closer to home here, well, now we're talking here. I'm not going to talk about Cabrillo and the guys who were just driving by. I'm talking about the people who walked here. The expeditions in the 1770s that really began to impact our ancestors. So we're talking here. So now, this was history. They usually don't append the American part to it. It's American history, but that's history. And this is California history. We haven't even got to the United States yet. Because in terms of the United States, you got to move it up. So now you're talking way over here. That's American history in this context. And yet everything we hear about, and when we talk about it in normal discourse, and certainly in our schools, is about this. And maybe some of this. And the rest is invisible, if not totally dismissed. So what is the consequence of that? Well, to us, of course, being erased, as Kanyon mentioned, I had the same experience. When I was growing up, I was extinct. I was a dead person. One time I went with my dad to our homeland, and by the time I was growing up, it was part of a national forest, Los Padres. And we were camping there, and I mentioned, you know, Dad, they told me I was dead at school. And he thought about it for a moment, he said, well, son, they think you're dead. They won't try to kill you. He was a practical guy. Not a lot of deep philosophy in that. And of course, you know there's a show about native people. You probably heard of it. It's called The Walking Dead. There's a big debate in Indian country, though, who's the bad guy, who's the good guy? And which one is us? Of course, we're the good guy, but is it the zombies? Because that's the perception from the outside, right? We're sort of zombies. But we think we're the good guys, we're the humans, the ones that aren't killing each other. And the newcomers are the zombies. So here we get a little harsh. This is the words of a mentor of mine. I have to agree, I'll admit that. When we talk from our perspective about newcomer,